shouts out instructions. Off the play fake, Lamar escaping the pocket, slings it to the end zone. Touchdown Ravens! And this time it's a receiver, Rashad Bateman, as the Ravens fans are having a party tonight in South Florida.
Oh yeah, the Ravens fans outnumbering the Dolphins fans by the end of this game, 28-6. Lamar Jackson with 4 touchdowns, only 5 incompletions. That was Jerry Sandusky on WBAL, and sometimes Shook, the broadcasting call is just jumping out of the seat, but that felt very ho-hum because let's face it, the second half of this game was rather ho-hum. Hopefully this recap will not be, and we're going to have some fun on the back end talking a little bit about the futures of Tua Tagovailoa, maybe some other quarterbacks that could be available this offseason. But first, we talk about the return of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and what a return it was. He demonstrated his ongoing connection with Mark Andrews, which has been the backbone of their offense for years, a staple in this scheme, whether, it was Gregg Roman or Todd Monken calling plays, he's always been the guy to go to. So, of course, he goes to him twice for the first 2 touchdowns. And, of course, he schemed up wide open on the second one, a little mesh concept, runs 2 defenders into each other. Andrews wide open, easy score. But even then, even with those 2 touchdown drives, the Ravens didn't really look that good in the first half. The Dolphins had a shot, and they wasted that opportunity. And once the second half arrived and the Ravens come out of halftime, they just go right down the field, touchdown pass, right down the field again, touchdown pass to Rashad Bateman. 3 to tight ends, 1 to receiver, Rashad Bateman, 4 total, runaway win. The Ravens, we've said this before, I guess we'll say it again. They may just be back. They are very much in the running because Lamar Jackson looks as good as he did well before he got hurt.
It's so funny because going into this game, everyone's thinking, hey, the Ravens, they're almost the favorites in the AFC North. Meanwhile, everyone's just assuming the Dolphins season is over. And yet they both only had 2 wins entering this game. And you know what? Sometimes the boneheaded consensus, just very ho-hum thinking is the right one. Yeah, the Ravens are much, much better. It was obvious. And it's a kiss of death. When you dominate half of football statistically against a superior team like the Dolphins did in the first half of this game, it was 225 yards to 101 at halftime, and you're trailing on the scoreboard. That always corrects. It always corrects in the second half, and you described how it was. By the end of the game, even the stats are better for Baltimore. I thought coming out in the third quarter, there was a couple of key sequences there. Number one, on a 3rd and long to start the third quarter drive, Lamar Jackson actually scrambles, and he really didn't all night. That was about it. And you did wonder if he felt 100%. You didn't get to see him let loose on that hamstring very often, but that was one play where he did scramble, picked up the first down, and then they go right down the field and end up with the Charlie Kolar touchdown. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Dolphins get the ball back, and this to me was the Dolphins in a nutshell, their season. First down, Jonah Savanea, who's been a disaster this year, one of the worst starting offensive linemen in the league, gives up a sack to Travis Jones. Second down, they run it on 2nd and 17 or something, get absolutely nothing, felt like a give-up play. And then even worse, on 3rd down, Tua's throwing a check down that only would have gotten 2 or 3 yards, and that's knocked down at the line of scrimmage. And it reminded me of the Raiders a little bit from a few weeks ago. And I like to call it the I don't want to be here offense. And the Dolphins fans just let them know, just booing the hell out of them down in Miami.
I believe that was the moment in which 4 fans in the stands put the brown paper bags over their heads, which was a proper response. The funny thing is if you just watched that drive, you thought the Dolphins, that was their offense the entire night, and it wasn't. In fact, at times they moved the ball effortlessly. They went right down the field. It's just that once they got in or near the red zone, they self-destructed over and over again. You can go all the way back to the first half when they have 3 points on the board. The game is very well within reach, and it's 4th and 1. They're going to go for it. False start, backs them up 5 yards. 4th and 6, settle for a field goal. Kicker misses the field goal wide right. They had multiple pre-snap penalties, delay of games, false starts, every type of procedural penalty that you could imagine, they essentially committed. They couldn't get out of their own way. And even when they found success, they found ways to bring themselves in the opposite direction and hurt their chances. They had opportunities and they blew them. Although I will say, The one call on Ollie Gordon where he was flagged for a penalty that still doesn't make sense to me. You could say he was tripping, like that's
Right.
maybe what they might call, but he slipped and fell. And the edge rusher, I think it's Mike Green, the rookie, leaps right over him and is unbothered. And yet a flag comes out and it wipes out Tua's best throw of the night, probably their best scoring opportunity. And it felt like from there, they were cooked.
Yeah, that was a 50-yard completion to Waddle. Even that play, though, which was a positive play, yeah, that was one I watched on the Prime Vision, and that ball took forever to get there. And you're kind of thinking, man, if someone else would throw it there, that thing's a touchdown.
A little less air. Don't let your receiver get blasted.
Jump up for it in a contested catch situation. But you're absolutely right. When the team isn't struggling, that pre-snap penalty made McDaniel lose his absolute mind. They're getting bad luck on the tripping, and then it's also bad execution. And then sometimes it's just an absolutely weird play call. Let's actually listen to the Tua incompletion to Devin Achane on one of those fourth downs. This was a 4th and 2 later in the game.
Back to throw, looking to his right. Flips it, corner, end zone, incomplete. Achane was covered by Hamilton. There was a miscommunication.
Yeah, somebody was not where they needed to be, and boy, you come away with no points after another nice drive. Wow.
That was Jimmy Cefalo and Joe Rose on WBGG. And yeah, you mentioned all the different ways that they managed to blow things. They were inside the 31-yard line of the Ravens 6 times tonight.
Yeah.
They got six points. That was one of them. It's a 0 blitz, and they don't have a better call or a better option for Tua, who had time, than throwing like a slot fade to Achane, who basically gave up on the route and against Kyle Hamilton. But none of that was good.
I have so many thoughts about this play. I understand why you go for it here. Ideally, your kicker makes the field goal. It's 14-9. Maybe you settle for a field goal to make it 14-12. But you realize this is maybe your best scoring opportunity, at least to this point in the game. You're going to go for it. Okay, gutsy call. Modern football, we're all on board with that. What we're not on board with is putting a running back in the slot and running a slot fade to him. He doesn't even know how to run a slot fade as evidenced by that play. I mean, he never even makes it to the end zone to try to catch that ball. And Mike McDaniel just looks up toward the canopy that they built over Hard Rock Stadium. Such a nice renovation they've done. And just probably wondered, what did I do to deserve this? Why am I being forced to put a running back in the slot and he doesn't know how to run the route? What more can I do? And responsibility falls on him for putting Achane in that situation and asking him to do that. But also, this is professional football. And if that's the best thing that you can put out there, just kind of illustrates how bad of a situation your team's been in.
Yeah, when I look at their offense and I think about them moving forward, like Achane's a good player. He ends up with 102 yards from scrimmage. His explosiveness is awesome. Jalen Waddle continues to produce without Tyreek Hill there. It's 6 catches for 82 yards, and it would have been much more if not for that bogus tripping penalty. But I just think the Dolphins fans are so sick of watching this offense, which are just the same timing in cuts to Waddle over and over. And the timing wasn't perfect tonight. There were drops by other receivers, Malik Washington with a couple fumbles in this game. So that, it was all bad. You can't just pick on one particular thing. I thought actually in the first half, they ran the ball very well. And as you mentioned, like, we're moving the ball well against this Ravens defense. Let's give the Ravens a little more credit. So actually you spoke about that second touchdown to Andrews, which was, yes, it looked like a simple throw because the two defenders ran into each other. I thought it was another good game out of Todd Monken, 2 straight clean weeks from this Ravens offense. The running game took a little while to get going, but Derrick Henry ends up going over 120 yards with a big second half. So that looked like a lot of Ravens games from a year ago. Slow start, but finished well. But I thought this was a beautiful throw still by Lamar Jackson. And yes, it was great to see all 3 tight ends with multiple catches. Let's listen to the second Andrews touchdown.
Play clock at 1. Lamar takes the snap. Deep drop. Lofts it to the 10. Caught. Andrews in. Touchdown Ravens. 2 for 2 for Mark Andrews. A 20-yard throw, catch, and run. And the rust is gone for Lamar Jackson. That was a beautiful throw.
Yeah, one thing I'd like the last couple of weeks is everyone's gotten involved. Andrews with a little more juice than I expected. Maybe the Dolphins defenders are just slow. Isaiah Likely, a lot of juice on one of his long yards after the catch play. And then Zay Flowers with the big play down the field. Bateman got that touch. And so I just like they're spreading it out. I'm not going to overreact, but hey, Nick, like their B game is all they need to do potentially to go on a long winning streak. As long as the defense is just okay and normal, like they don't have to be great, just be okay. Then I think the offense can play this sort of B game and potentially rip off a long winning streak.
Yeah, there were a couple of differences in this game tonight versus how they've looked with Lamar out. And obviously the return of Lamar Jackson alone opens up so many options for you. But like that play in particular, it's a mesh concept, but the reason that it becomes a touchdown is because Andrews is able to deepen his route. It's not just like a flat drag. He's getting 10, 15 yards down the field when he's catching that ball. And because the defenders ran into each other, he's got a bunch of green grass to run through to get to the end zone. That's just a good, design, right? But then you also look at the defense and you think about the players that they have missed. When you watch them tonight, they did a really good job up front, plugging up gaps, eating up blockers, and allowing Roquan Smith to just play really well. He was there to make a lot of key tackles, key stops. He fights through multiple blocks, shuts down a screen early in the game, shuts down a running attempt later in the game. Like he's been playing really well over the last couple of weeks, which is a boon for them as well. And then, they talked about it playing on the broadcast. We've heard it all over the place. The acquisition of Alohi Gilman allowed them to move Kyle Hamilton around, which he played in the box a lot tonight, but he's also making plays all over the field. And then you got Malachi Starks picking off Tua Tagovailoa downfield. Like, you're starting to get some of these guys back. The defense is starting to come back together. And against a team like the Dolphins, who did move the ball well on you and weren't able to get it done, a lot of self-inflicted wounds, you're still the beneficiary of that. The question is, going forward, when you try to compare week to week, the quality of opponent, like we look at the Ravens schedule, why could they potentially make this a run? They play the Vikings, whose offense has been dormant for a while. They play the Browns, who are one of the worst offenses in the NFL. They play the Jets. Same story, save for last week. They play the Bengals, also the same story. That's their next 4. And then they play Pittsburgh, and that's their first big game in that stretch. I could see them winning all 4, even if they just play like they did tonight. A B game tonight probably wins all 4 of those games. Maybe the Vikings game is close. Maybe the Bengals game is close because it's a division rivalry. But ultimately, if this is all you have to do, if this is what you can produce in your sleep on a week-by-week basis, we're going to look at it real quick, and they're going to be 7-5.
Yeah, I want to see Lamar kind of let it loose in terms of how he plays as a runner. I'm curious how the defense is going to play against better competition. We'll see where the Vikings are at for that game. The Bengals offense is certainly playing better. I am worried that they had a 14% pressure rate against the Miami Dolphins. I know it's tough sometimes because Tua gets rid of the ball so quickly, but that was the weakness last week too against Chicago. They just don't have one-on-one pass rush wins. Kyle Van Noy had one tonight. Mike Green basically didn't have any. They're not a team that gets a lot of pressure. So if you're looking for a fly in the ointment, that's it. But I'm so glad you pointed out Roquan Smith. That's the number one difference right now. He just changes their team. He did not look healthy, and he was not an effective player before he went down with that injury, and they sat him down. In the last 2 weeks, he's been the best player on the field, and that's a field with Kyle Hamilton, who's also been a bigger factor because of where they're using Alohi Gilman, who had the greatest thing that can happen on the field, which is he blew his assignment near the goal line, and he let Malik Washington get wide open. And then he realized that he blew it, and then he ran over and he knocked the fumble out. So it's in the middle of that play, oh, I blew it, and then you run over, and then you save the day, and you get the turnover. So good job by Alohi Gilman on that play. But good point there on Roquan. I think that's so huge.
Yeah, and that's the difference that they can make. Now, you don't want to necessarily live on those thinner margins against better teams, but all we need is a demonstration that you can kind of work toward that goal. And I think that's what we've seen from this defense over the last 2 weeks. I mean, I think back to the Chicago game, they had a key interception that set up a touchdown that flipped that game on its side and put the Ravens in a position of command. And they've been making those plays over the last 2 weeks. So it's a small sample size. It's only one game back with Lamar. By the way, did you get nervous like I did when he did run tonight? Especially in the fourth quarter, he had a couple of scrambles where I'm like, A, why is he still in the game? And B, oh my God, be careful.
Why is Derrick Henry getting 5 carries up 28-6 just so you can go over 100? But then he went over 100 and they gave him 3 or 4 more carries. Just why? Just don't stop.
Yeah, not necessary. We don't need this.
All right, good game. And keep an eye at Teddy Buchanan, spelled Teddy, but with an E on the end, which I like. He's kind of stabilized the linebacker position too. He's actually looked pretty good, I think, next to Roquan. So that's like another change that they've made throughout the course of the season. That's good. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, I mean, they've been done. Would they consider changing coaches with this little extra time? We'll see. They have Buffalo next week at home, which is another opportunity to give up a lot of points and to get a lot of boos at home. That's potentially another spot. They have 3 more island games this year. I apologize to the citizens of Germany. We're sending Commanders Dolphins there, unfortunately. And they have back-to-back primetime games. Monday night, week 15 against the Steelers in Pittsburgh. They can flex Monday nights. Now, would they flex it when it's like one dead team versus a good team? They might not do that, but they should consider it. And then here's a game that is getting flexed. Sunday Night Football, Dolphins-Bengals in week 16. There's no chance that game is going to.
I mean, unless the Bengals found themselves in a playoffs.
Doesn't matter.
No, you're right.
They're going to do better than that for Sunday Night Football in week 16.
The return of Joe Burrow?
No, that's too good a week. Okay, you mentioned Joe Burrow. Let's talk about another quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. As I'm watching this game, my mind starts wandering. And as I'm looking through some of the news that's coming out of Arizona, my mind starts wandering to the quarterback market for 2026. I personally don't think Tua is going to be for sure on this Dolphins team. I think he'll be available at the very least. Let's take a quick break. And on the other side, we're going to talk about Tua. We're going to talk about Kyler Murray. And we might even talk about my boy Gino, who could be available this time. All right, we're back on NFL Daily, and we're going to do a little news. We can do that. We're taping this Thursday night. It's been a minute since we taped that preview show, and new information is worth mentioning here. Jacoby Brissett, in the portion of practice that the Arizona Cardinals writers were able to witness, was throwing the ball to the starters, Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, etc. Kyler Murray, in the portion of practice that reporters were able to watch, was throwing passes to backups and like scout team guys. Okay. Kyler Murray listed as limited on the injury report. We thought he might be fully back this week. He's listed as limited. Insert Brian Windhorst conspiracy fingers here. I don't think this is even much of a conspiracy. The Cardinals do not have Kyler Murray speak to the media today. He was scheduled to speak to the media. They tell the media that a quarterback press conference at a future date this week will occur. Hosted by quarterback. By the way, for what it's worth, the last couple of weeks when Jacoby Brissett did start, he did a press conference later in the week, like so. It sure sounds like Kyler Murray is getting what I like to call the old J.J. McCarthy. A little soft benching here. That's what I'm calling it. And I'm curious about your thoughts there. And we can get into the long term of it all, but maybe let's start with the short term of it all with what's going on with the Cardinals here.
No, Kyler, you're still a little banged up. Why don't you take another week off? Our offense is kind of doing better with that. Why don't you take another week off? We're trying to get a win here. How about consider these stats from NFL Research? Jacoby Brissett had a 65 completion percentage, averaged nearly 300 passing yards per game, 4-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 98.9 passer rating in his 2 starts. He had over 275 passing yards in each of his 2 starts. Kyler has not broken 220 passing yards in any of his games in 2025. Arizona averaged 20.6 points per game with Kyler Murray in the lineup and under 300 yards per game, weeks 1 to 5. 25 points per game, 365 yards per game with Jacoby Brissett. The numbers tell you what the eye has already told you over the last 2 weeks, which is that this offense has been better with Jacoby Brissett at the controls. Now, this is a team that if they got into 3rd and long, which was a common occurrence with Kyler at quarterback, they were pretty much doomed. You go back to last year, same story. They lose James Conner weeks ago. Running game, a struggle. That usually would insulate Kyler in these situations. They have a better offense with Jacoby at quarterback right now, and they are a team that needs to win a football game. They are 2-5. They are playing a Dallas Cowboys defense that can't stop a nosebleed.
Interesting.
Why not keep Jacoby in and maximize your potential against a bad defense? I am on board with the soft benching. It's weird how it was described today. We are preparing Kyler as the starter, but you're not going to say he's the starter. So what's the point? And if you're preparing him as the starter, why is he running with the twos?
So
Make it make sense.
I'm hearing from a lot of Cardinals fans or just general fans on Twitter. It's like, oh, he's just doing a smoke screen. It's going to be Kyler. Hearing from others that it's the opposite. Like he's just trying to keep it vague, but it'll be Jacoby. But Kyler's hurt. They've indicated the last couple of weeks that they thought Kyler would be back for this game. He literally was on the practice field before the last game, which was before the bye week for them. This is at an absolutely crucial moment in this entire regime's run. Year 3, when it needs to happen. And they have a quarterback that they inherited with a massive contract. And look, I know he got that contract when they arrived, but he was there before they arrived. And you have an offensive coordinator in Drew Petzig who's familiar with Jacoby, and there was a lot of confidence. Jordan alluded to it when she went to Cardinals training camp earlier this offseason. I mean, in camp, like how much they like Jacoby Brissett. I just think it's telling, and it's a huge moment for this entire regime because they're saying when the chips are down, like this is who we want, this is who we trust to turn our season around, to save our jobs. And it doesn't hurt that they're against the Cowboys on Monday night either. I mean, like the whole country's going to be watching, and we're playing this cupcake defense. I mean, that would be a soft landing for Kyler to return. So I think that says a lot. And now I want to pivot to the long term of it all. Because I think the Cardinals are a good team that could get back in the mix, but the NFC is deeper. This isn't the AFC. It's going to be a tough road to get all the way back with their brutal schedule. I don't think Kyler Murray is going to be on this team next year. And so that immediately makes him, in my mind, looking at the landscape, the most intriguing quarterback that could be available. The draft doesn't look as frisky, although obviously those guys are going to be interesting. And then the free agency and trade market is never great. And we'll talk about a few guys. I think Tua is one of them. But I think personally, Kyler would have a lot of value. Do you agree?
I think it's about fit. Like, you have to think about suitors. How desperate are the suitors? First team I think of was the Browns. Like,
I wrote some down. That's one of them.
Are they interested? Are they interested in Kyler Murray? I mean, that's not a quarterback that necessarily fits the dynamic or the style of offense that Kevin Stefanski runs. In fact, Jacoby Brissett ran it pretty well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that's a fit.
No, but I think he's going to draw any quarterback with any sort of history of success, whether it's 1 year or, sprinkled in success here or there or high and low moments, which is the latter is basically Kyler Murray's career, is going to command interest because there are never 32 solid jobs. There are never 32 confirmed starters in the NFL. There's always interest somewhere. So yes, I think he will draw interest.
Yeah, and I think he's a better option than plenty out there. He's only 28 years old. He's shown a level of success for extended periods. The problem is he hasn't struck it over a whole season. He'll have a hot month. He'll have a hot half season. But at a pretty high level, the skill set is obvious. I think there's concerns about how he leads. Patrick Peterson, his former teammate, has voiced those concerns when he was on the team, and now he's voicing them as part of the media, that he doesn't think that he essentially rallies the troops enough and gets the buy-in from his teammates in the way that Patrick Peterson would like to see. That said, sometimes a second chance in a new place, we've seen it with good quarterbacks. Like, it was poisoned for Darnold. It was poisoned for Baker. Geno Smith took a while to get going. Daniel Jones, I think it just could be good for him. If he's going to have success, maybe it's going to be somewhere else where he's out from the pressure and everything that's happened since he's been the number 1 overall pick in Arizona.
I need to know the teams now because I'm thinking about all those quarterbacks you just listed, and like it doesn't work for Baker if he doesn't go through it. It doesn't work for Sam if he doesn't have that year in Minnesota. I need to know the teams.
Okay. Well, there's Miami, number one.
Okay.
That's going to be tricky because if we'll get to Tua, but they'd have to take on some.
By the way, could you imagine a scenario in which Stephen Ross doesn't fire Mike McDaniel at all and just like decides to swap quarterbacks? Because that would be absurd.
In fact, it was hilarious watching the Chris Greer shots that they were trying to show, but he was like behind a post. It was like, I'm hiding from you. I'm hiding. I know you're there. Just
point the camera at Dan Marino. He's wearing a cool teal jacket.
Right. Because the blame pie can go around. And I think considering the fact that the Dolphins haven't won a playoff game in 24 years, was it? And that's the longest of any team in the NFL. I mean, I think the blame pie has to start at the very top because that's the most common, the thing that's run through all those years. But Chris Greer has been there basically that whole time too, by the way. He hasn't been in charge the whole time, but he's been in charge for a while. So I think you can go to the very top, and then I think you go right under him, and that's Chris Greer. So Mike McDaniel would be lower for me, but I assume they're going to blow up the whole thing. So there's Miami. That one could be tricky. There's the Saints. Our friend Adam is immediately like, don't put that stink on me. I was like, you should be so happy if you could get Kyler Murray. He'd be the best post-Breeze quarterback you've had. I would. It's got to be better than whoever you find for next year. You should be happy with Kyler.
With Kellen Moore, I don't mind that. I don't hate that.
I could see that. The Raiders, I think, are going to be in the market for a quarterback. I don't know what's going to be going on there, but Geno Smith, you can get out of that contract, and unless it changes, I think they're going to be looking. I can just see that. Can't you just see Kyler Murray in the silver?
Yeah, I mean, in the silver and black, yeah, but the Raiders are like very radioactive to me right now. So that's just, I don't think
it's
any
not going to be good for
there.
him. And also, I think Tom Brady's kind of making quarterback judgments, recommendations. I don't think Kyler Murray.
I don't think he would lean toward Kyler. No.
The Jets could be looking for a quarterback. Justin Fields is on a 2-year contract, but certainly they could be looking for an upgrade. You mentioned the Browns. After that, it'd have to be more of a surprise team. Could Jacksonville be looking for a quarterback? I don't know.
God, let's not do that.
Once we get further down the list, it gets into just bigger surprises. But he'll have a market, I think, and the contract is reasonable. $36 million. Depending on which part of the roster bonus when it's paid, something around $32 million has already been guaranteed. That's fine. Like, you would take that. There's really nothing past next year. So it'd be a 1-year trial, and you see what happens with Kyler Murray. I think it'd be interesting. I think he has a chance. I'm planting my flag.
I'm thinking back a few years ago to when he got this contract, and then there was all the drama, and he cleared his social media and all that stuff, and it's kind of crazy how when time passes, suddenly those contracts that seem so bloated and like could be an albatross in future years, the way they're structured, you're like, they can get out of it. Like, yeah, it's fine. This is totally feasible. We talked about this. We set this stage going into the season. We felt like the Cardinals' 2025 season was a judgment of Jonathan Gannon, but more importantly, a judgment of the future with Kyler Murray and whether he'd be there or not. So now that we've arrived at this point, I'm not at all surprised. Yeah, I think it could definitely happen.
And it was a really interesting time when, if you think back to it, because that was 2022, and like they were under a lot of pressure to commit to him. But then you look at this Gannon, regime, and the general manager, precedes Gannon there. And it was believed there was some pressure, coming from ownership too. And so he never has exactly been the Cardinals guy in terms of their general manager. Anyways, okay, let's move on to Tua. I was trying to think of Monty Ossenfort's name, and it was just like double checking.
Now you got it.
When he was there. Man, I think they got to get out of this Tua business. He doesn't make sense without Mike McDaniel. I don't think Mike McDaniel's going to be there. He has a lot of guaranteed money next year, $54 million guaranteed. Almost nothing after next year. But I at least think they would check around to see if there was some sort of market for Tua. It's all going to depend who's running the show there. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I think he's a limited quarterback. And I would pay to get out of the Tua market, eat the dead money in the short term. You actually save money in terms of the salary cap next year if you trade him, despite all that guaranteed money accelerating. They would save money against the cap by trading him. And with that in mind, if they would take on some of the money, then I think another team would be interested. Maybe the Vikings would be interested in a 1B. Like, you just throwing different names out there.
Yeah, if the McCarthy thing continues to be a mystifying experience as it's been so far. But yeah, you're right, because they're 11 in the red right now, and they would clear 13-4 on a trade with him next year pre June 1st, right? So it's I mean, no, they'd clear 11. They'd clear 11, which would get them out of the red. They'd carry 45.2 in dead. It amounts somewhat to the Broncos getting rid of Russell Wilson. And I think if you're going for a regime change and an identity shift away from this creative, motion-heavy offense, we're going to throw it all over the yard, yada, yada, yada. Like Tyreek Hill, he's talked about potentially retiring. Like if he retired now, he'd be fine with it. Like a lot of change is coming to this team, and I think it's necessary. And I think it should involve your quarterback, not to just be like a guy who agrees with everything you say on this specific episode, but like the proof is in the tape. Now, I will say, there have been games where he's been very good. There have been games where he's been very bad. Tonight was neither. He was average and his teammates let him down. But if you're changing your identity, you're right. Tua does not fit. The only worst place to be, though, than where they're at right now is a team with no identity and no quarterback. And that's the big risk you take.
He wasn't great tonight, but I think tonight was a perfect example of I think he just has a limited skill set. I don't think he's great adjusting after the snap. He has to do a few certain things well. He certainly doesn't create plays on his own and doesn't have a huge arm. And it's probably more likely because of the contract that he will be there with either a rookie or someone that he's competing with for one last year. But I just am of the mind that if it's a new head coach, like, don't waste that year. We see teams do that all the time. And even if that's likely to happen, I don't think it's a particularly good idea. By the way, I did want to make a correction. Ossenfort and Gannon did completely inherit Murray. And what I was thinking about was when they were hired. Remember, they made the big show of really embracing him. And the timing was really confusing because they had just signed Murray to that big contract the previous summer before Kingsbury gets blown out, in the middle of that season. So the timing was tricky. But remember, they went to Oklahoma and went to watch his number get retired. And it was they were trying to really embrace him, even though that wasn't their guy. And I think they've tried to make it work and it just hasn't. And that happens.
Both of these players and I think there was probably more ammunition behind signing Kyler than there was Tua. But we have found ourselves in this strange position in the NFL these days where the contracts get bigger and bigger and teams, there's a lot of confirmation bias within these front offices if the front office that drafted the guy is still there. You see that across a lot of different positions, but especially at quarterback. 3 guys come to mind that have signed these big deals because they were due, and there were questions. Kyler, Tua, and Trevor Lawrence. 2 of those guys could be facing a new home next year, as we just discussed. We'll see what happens with the Jaguars, but last year it felt like maybe Trevor was headed that way too. Weird time in the NFL to be in a position where you got to pay big dollars to a guy that you might not be 100% convinced is your guy.
Well, in a weird time, and I've always thought this, that the 14th best quarterback in the league gets a pretty close to the same contract as the best quarterbacks in the league. Like Jimmy Garoppolo has been the highest paid quarterback in the league. Trevor Lawrence has been the highest paid quarterback in the league. Tua Tagovailoa has been the highest paid quarterback in the league. It's a weird system, and it always makes me think that the most underpaid and best value players in the NFL are like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Because it's like, why are they the same as Tua? And if there was no salary cap, they'd all be making $150 million a year. Okay.
Or defer their contract like Shohei Ohtani.
Right, until they move to Japan after their careers. I think Geno could be available, by the way, too. And then a guy who would be on MVP ballots if the MVP was voted for today, and we'll be doing our midseason awards next week. Daniel Jones, also a free agent. I don't list him and want to even really go too deep into him because if he continues on this trajectory, there's just no way the Colts are going to let him go. He'll be franchise tagged. They'll figure out a contract, but teams do not let players like that go if they don't want to, and there's no reason why he would want to go anywhere. Anyways,
and they're fortunate, but they also deserve credit for taking that swing on him because there's been a lot of teams whose first round pick flames out and they have nowhere else to go. And that's the track they were on. And they were just like, you know what? We need to bring in competition for Anthony Richardson. There's been a lot of those situations where we're going to bring in competition and it doesn't produce anything. This happened to produce the perfect scenario for them to where they could just be like, yeah, Anthony, just stay over there. We got a good thing going here. We'll pay this guy.
I did the Locked On Vikings podcast earlier this week. Check that out with Luke Braun. And we were saying they had a chance to do that perfect scenario themselves and just pay a few more dollars for Daniel Jones. And they probably would have had to promise him a real chance to win that starting job. And I don't think they were ready to do that. And maybe J.J. McCarthy will prove this all stupid. And maybe Daniel Jones will have a Sam Darnold-like end to the year, which will complicate matters for the Colts. But the difference is the Colts don't have anyone waiting in the wings that they're going to have faith in. So I think Daniel Jones is going to be there unless the wheels came off really hard. Don't think that's going to happen. All right. The wheels stayed on this podcast, even if they didn't stay on this game. Love you, Shook. Appreciate you. And yes, I hope your fan from the wedding in New Orleans is looking. We will be back on Sunday. Check out the pick show in the feed, by the way. The Cardinals are one of my picks. I don't care if it's Jacoby Brissett. I like the Cardinals, but check out all the other picks with me and Cynthia, and check Shook, myself, Patrick, Jordan out on Sunday for the recap show. See you then.